Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. Thanks for joining us at 8 o'clock on Tuesday night. If you're joining from the UK, I think we've got someone signed, or maybe a few people signed from the US as well. So you're coming in much earlier, but welcome to you too. We'll just start in very very shortly. Hope you all had some food already. Relaxing, maybe with a drink. I've got a beer here. It's a very informal session. I'm going to ask some questions, see if we can pull out some tips and just different ways of thinking about planning holidays and ideas around that, around family holidays. So we'll do that. There'll be plenty of time for questions at the end if you've got any. So just ask them as we go along, put them into the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. As it's informal, I think there's a few people joining us still, but we will crack on and get started so we can get through to this evening. So, brief introduction to myself. I am Sam. I'm one of the co-founders of Experience Travel Group, and I think I've met some of you, or at least talked to some of you before. I saw some familiar names on the list, including someone I believe we might have done their honeymoon, but it was quite a long time ago. So that's exciting. But yeah, so if you haven't met me, I'm Sam, co-founder, and Experience Travel Group. For those of you who don't know, we do luxury holidays, immersive holidays, experience-based holidays, but with that sense of adventure. We want to get people to experience the country, to really discover something for themselves. And family's always been a huge part of what we do at ETG, and we really enjoy it, because when a family can go away and create those kind of memories that hold them together really as a family for the rest of time, really, and the rest of time you're together. So they really are so important, and they're really fun to put together and work on. Now, as I say, we're just going to talk a little bit here about some very top line ideas and ways of looking at holidays, ways of thinking about it, maybe some ideas about what might work for you and your family. But we'd love to talk to you individually, whether that's about a specific country that you've got in mind, we talk about a consultation, or whether it's even if you're not sure and you want some ideas and develop those, then be very welcome to speak to us about that and just kick around a few ideas. So we're going to talk a bit, as I say, about family travel in Asia and some destinations and some tips and tricks. But as I say, if you've got any questions at all, please do put them into the chat. So first of all, let's introduce the panelists. First of all, Melissa, can we start off? Can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about travel, why travel has been important for your family?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Melissa. I've been working in travel for a very, very long time now. I think I lost count, about 25 years. And I've been at ETG with Sam since it started, really, in about 2006. And I'm head of product here, so I work with our suppliers and everyone in the company, really, across all our destinations, to make sure all the experiences and hotels and all the things that make up the holidays are top quality, I hope. And I'm also a mum. I've got two kids, Edie and Charlie, who are now 13 and 11. They're both at secondary school, and I've travelled. They're very lucky. I've travelled with them quite a lot since they were quite little. And I guess in terms of how travel's been important to us, I just really value being able to share what I do for a job with them, but also seeing them kind of enjoy Asia as much as I do. I don't really know about important, but I think it's I really value them being able to see the big wide world, but also the funny little memories, really, that we've had together that we wouldn't have otherwise without travel. So one thing I thought about, they were talking about the other day, is the time we went to Angkor Wat back in about, I think it was about 6 years ago, when they were much smaller. And I wasn't really sure if I'd made a ridiculous decision dragging them out of bed at 5 a.m. to see sunrise at Angkor Wat, and I wasn't really sure if they'd appreciated it or if it really made any much of an impression on them at all. And they definitely don't remember much about the actual sort of origins of the ancient temple at all, really, but they vividly remember to this day walking around the temple with our lovely guide Kia, and then being blessed by a monk. This is the bit that they really remember, being blessed by a Buddhist monk who sprinkled water all over their heads as part of the blessing. So I think it's the little memories really like that make it make travel quite special for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And Holly, can you introduce yourself as well, please, and tell us briefly about what you enjoy about arranging family trips?
I can indeed. Hi, everyone. I'm Holly, and I'm currently head of travel at ETG, which basically means that together with our fabulous travel team, I get the really quite fun job of being able to put together some really fun, exciting, and inventive trips. So I've done that for the past 8 years now. And I think that's the main thing that I enjoy about it, really. Exactly that. I get to really get to know everyone and get creative with it. No two families are the same. So really understanding what everyone's looking for, and being able to get quite inventive and put something together quite different every time is what's really fun. I think probably in the time that I've been doing this, I've probably arranged over 200 family holidays in that time, as a bit of an estimate. But as I say, each of them completely different from one to the next. So yeah, that's me really.
Brilliant. Thanks, Holly. Good. Well, let's get into it then. So, Melissa, I know we'll say that all of our destinations work for families, and certainly we've arranged family trips for all of the destinations we cover. I think there are 12 of them on our site. But Melissa, for you, which of the ETG destinations do you think work particularly well for families, and why?
Yeah, well, it's pretty difficult, and I could probably talk all day on this, so you might have to like cut me short. But I would say I particularly love I love most of the destinations, but I would sort of single out Sri Lanka and Indonesia, both of which I've been to with my kids fairly recently. And I think the thing I love so much about Sri Lanka really is no matter where you go, you feel you feel immersed in a different culture and beautiful scenery, but it never really feels overwhelming. And it probably sounds like a bit of a cliche, but there really is a kind of genuinely warm welcome in Sri Lanka, and you just always feel comfortable straight away. And I also find it's quite hassle-free to get around. You have our lovely chauffeur guides there on hand, so you don't really have to worry about internal travel arrangements once you're there. But despite it all being easy and feeling quite hassle-free, there's always kind of something a bit unexpected that happens. A bit of kind of travel magic always just seems to appear. And I don't know, it could be like the last time we were there, elephants were roaming along the road next to us. We were driving along, these elephants appeared along the side of the road, or a peacock popping up and sort of crowing at you. It just all adds to the whole kind of family feeling really engaged in it. And I think that's kind of one of the key things for me about Sri Lanka. But there's also huge variety in a small space, which is good because it means you can plan a fairly relaxed trip, or you could do something really adventurous if the kids are a bit older and that's what suits you better. There's lots of nature, there's some amazing off the beaten track experiences you can do. And there's kind of always something new you can do in Sri Lanka, and it just always feels to me like an adventure without the hassle, really. So I think, sort of saying that very quickly, that's in a nutshell what I think is really good about Sri Lanka for families. And we can sort of tailor something specific to you, really. There's so many different things there. And then Indonesia, perhaps not as obvious as Sri Lanka, but it's a fantastic family destination. It's quite different from Sri Lanka. Obviously, it's about 1,000 times bigger to start off with. But I think it's sort of the ultimate family adventure, really. If you want something really special, then Indonesia is a really, really great option. And it's also the weather there's great in our summer holidays. So that's kind of handy because you could spend the whole 6 weeks there and barely scratch the surface of Indonesia. Um, so I think the key thing with Indonesia, really, I mean, that just saying Indonesia is a bit too broad. So it's about deciding which islands to visit and then narrowing it down to what works for you. And there's a huge variety of really interactive and kind of once in a lifetime experiences. You can be hiking up volcanoes or swimming with whale sharks or seeing orangutans, or of course, obviously the famous one is the Komodo dragon. So I think really the way you have to look at Indonesia is kind of breaking it down by islands. And I think that the main ones that are really great for families are Java, which has got the epic scenery, and you can explore volcanoes and see ancient sites and so on. And from there you can kind of do a side trip to Indonesian Borneo from Java, so that ties together quite nicely. And then you've got Flores, which is the launch pad for Komodo National Park, which is famous for the dragons, but also amazing for marine life and snorkeling and diving and that kind of thing as well. And then a perhaps sort of bit less known one is Sumba, which is not so many people go to, but there's some lovely hotels there and lovely beaches that hardly anyone visits. And then coming on to perhaps the better known ones for family trips. Lombok is really good for beaches and kind of rural life. There's lovely community-based tourism village that we work with there. And Lombok ties in with Bali, which is kind of obviously the most popular and well-known island in Indonesia. And I think probably most people know these days the south coast of Bali has become very, very busy and built up these days, but the rest of the island is still beautiful. You can kind of go north and stay in paddy fields and do some lovely activities like cycle rides down mountains and it's lots of fun.
Yeah, I tell you, but Bali's still got that magic to it, hasn't it? It's got that immersion because of the everyday kind of the rituals associated that they do, and that's kind of part of it, and you feel part of that when you go there, which is amazing. And Indonesia is just such a you just feel you can properly travel, can't you, in Indonesia when you're going from island to island? You really feel like it's a journey, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So on that note, I would throw in India again. It's not always thought of as it's sort of not the first destination people think of. I should have said I've got two boys. That's my other qualification for being on this call. I've got two boys now, 18 and 16. There they are with some friends in Burmese friends actually in Cambodia, and we've had some amazing trips. I first took them to India, North India, when they were 6 and 8, and although we've got some amazing memories from that trip, they were quite the oldest, the 8-year-old was maybe a little young. He found it quite anxiety inducing. But when we went back to South India a few years later, and that was really where it started in terms of them feeling like travelers and really loving that kind of thing. And they talk to this day about a meal they had on, food laid out on sort of banana leaves and eating with their hands. And I think they really decided then that they were adventurous eaters and that they would explore through the food, and they kind of kept that up, which is amazing. They made friends. They connected. They were fascinated by the history and the people there, and that was a huge success. And then I think this picture there reminds me of a trip we did last year, Cambodia and Vietnam. Again, fantastic destinations. So much history, interesting culture, really engaging. They got on so well with many of our guides. That guide there, Kian, is a guide that we have in Phnom Penh. And he actually shared his personal story of the of being a 7-year-old and escaping the Khmer Rouge, and it blew away George, my youngest, actually, just completely transformed his approach, and was fascinated by that whole period and how it could be like that. But he was also took a lot out of it. So thoroughly recommend Cambodia and Vietnam too. Holly, sorry, over to you. What have we missed?
I mean, I have to say, I generally just get very excited when I hear that a family is thinking of going over to Asia for the very first time, perhaps breaking away from doing the classic kind of Europe trip or going over to the US, because there just nothing beats landing in Asia, wherever you are, for the first time and just doing something being somewhere so different and exciting. And so, yeah, culturally different, really. It's kind of you kind of can't beat that that first time, that first feeling. But I would probably say this isn't an obvious first choice necessarily, but Borneo can be a real winner for a family holiday because you kind of have it all. You know, you've got jungles, of course, you've got the orangutans, which everyone finds fascinating. You've got really interesting tribal culture. You have caves, of course, you've got beaches. And it's just that little bit different. It's kind of that really cool place that you can brag about with your friends as well. So that was probably a little bit more under the radar, but yeah, really, really fun one. And I mean, let's not forget Thailand, which, despite what you might hear, is actually far more than just Phuket and full moon parties. It can be a really fun kind of first fling with Asia, as you know, it's kind of got it all again. You've got great food, friendly people, interesting culture, comfortable hotels. Plus, we know quite a few tips and tricks that will just help to get you just that little bit inch off the map, and yet doing something really different that most tourists wouldn't even think about doing or going to.
Yeah, and we've got actually just literally coming online the other day a new mountain experience in the in Mae Sot on the border with Myanmar. But our colleagues who went last week, I believe, are absolutely raving about it. I think it's a sort of community based project where you stay in a lodge which is run by the community and for the community, and there are elephants, rescue elephants, in a large area there, which are being sort of rehabilitated into the wild again, and you follow them with the trackers and learn about them and the culture of the area. It just sounds absolutely phenomenal. But there's quite a few things like that in Thailand, where you really can get right off that tourist trail, and have those experiences, but you've still got that lovely Thailand, the way they do the hotels so beautifully, and let's not forget the lovely beaches as well at the end of it. And you can get again right off the tourist trail with those beaches, can't you, Holly?
Yeah, there's some real hidden gems there.
There are. So in fact, we're onto hotels now, and some tips. Now we could sort of go on naming different hotels until the cows come home, but we thought that wouldn't be particularly helpful. But of course, you know, when you talk to us individually and go through that, we'd love to go into much more detail on that. But for now, we can talk about you know, an approach on hotels, tips on general hotels, and perhaps you know, some standouts would be good to hear about as well. So, Melissa, do you want to go first?
Yeah, obviously this is a really tricky one to narrow down. You know, like Sam said, we could talk about this all day, but I think a really good recommendation I would say is villas in Sri Lanka, which are fantastic and really good, especially if you're traveling with a group of friends. I've done this a couple of times now with sort of two families traveling together, and it's just brilliant because you get your own pool. You usually have a garden, you have your own chef and stuff, and it's kind of a really cool way to hang out with each other and just feel relaxed, and also can be quite cost effective. It is like especially the food. You just go to the shops with the chef and you pick your own groceries and your wine, and they'll cook it for you, and serve whatever you want really. So that's kind of my top tip. I think it's a really good way to it's a really good thing to sort of include in a trip to Sri Lanka, and it kind of works well if you mix it with some other kinds of accommodation as well. But one that worked really well for us that we stayed at with our friends about 18 months ago is Kalakanda House, which is a property on the south coast. Actually, it was sort of built, renovated by a lady who actually booked a family holiday with us and went. She's her family originally from Sri Lanka, and she went back to sort of discover her roots and bought this property and has got this beautiful villa. And we stayed there for a few days. Had 4 bedrooms. It's got a yoga space that is just lovely, and you can arrange for like a yoga guy to come and do yoga with you. It's a few steps from the beach, but really not you know, not hugely expensive. It was much cheaper than staying in a fancy hotel, and just a really great experience. So that's just one really, but there are loads of these lovely villas in Sri Lanka that kind of cater for different sized groups and sort of different levels of kind of luxury. So yeah, that would kind of be my top suggestion really, I think.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, isn't it? It's just the absolute ultimate. You're looked after, but you really connect with the staff there and have fun with them, and it's much more informal, really, isn't it, than a kind of hotel.
Yeah,
And you
kind of
can
a
run
home
on
from
your own.
home sort of vibe.
Yeah, exactly. It's a real privilege, and we're really proud of Dee, who the owner of that hotel. She literally, yeah, went travelled with us in 2016, was it,
I think
as a
so,
family
yeah.
holiday, and
Yeah.
ended up with this place. So, and it's absolutely awesome. So, fantastic. Holly, in your experience, what sort of hotels work well for families, and do you have any top tips?
Yeah, it's more of a tip, really, I think, because, generally when you are on these holidays in, where you're traveling around, you're going to be staying in a few different places. And I think that, perhaps having a lodge of some sort that you're staying at some point during your trip can be a really fun way to kind of mix things up a little bit and do things that just not isn't just your normal kind of standard hotel, really, because, often a lodge may offer a kind of more immersive kind of experience. So Sam sort of mentioned it earlier in terms of the community style lodge that you get in Thailand, where you're really getting involved with the local community, you're sort of feeling part of it. But also you can have the kind of wildlife lodges as well that you might get in Sri Lanka. There's a really lovely one called the Ibis, actually, that's by Wilpatu National Park. Just has a really lovely feel to it. Another example can be, I love one in Borneo. It's like a rainforest lodge called Sukau Rainforest Lodge. And it's just, it's a more immersive stay. They're often quite educational as well. And just staying there feels like a bit of an experience in its own right as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally right. And because you're right in there, you might find the kids doing stuff that you wouldn't necessarily expect. I remember a client telling me that their 13-year-old went off and did a bird walking trip at a lodge called the Mud House in Sri Lanka, and on their own, off their own volition, and they couldn't believe it. A lot of these places, it's a bit harder to get charged. So, you see people they get off their devices and engage. So I think that is a good tip. One from me actually is sort of in stark contrast to that, but don't be afraid to include a larger resort as part of the trip. It works well. One of my sons in particular, but both of them did enjoy having those facilities as well, and it's important to make sure that they get that as well. So I think mixing that up and contrast with something like a lodge works well. Now the next tip is, no, I'm really aware of our ridiculous privilege in this and suggesting something like this, and it really is a one-off special, but something that you'll always remember together, that you've got for kind of forever is incredible. And in Asia, it can be sort of manageable financially. It's still very, it's still punchy, but it can be manageable. And so we've got an example here of a boat trip in Komodo National Park. Just beautiful little bays that you wouldn't explore otherwise. You can see obviously the Komodo dragons, and going around here, and there are some absolutely fantastic trips that range from, they range in price quite substantially, but they are good value for what they are, and as something that will stay with you for a long time. They are worth considering. So yeah, so lots more ideas, as I say, that we'd love to talk to you about that, and that really doesn't scratch the surface. If you've got any specific questions or ask us for recommendations, then do put those into the chat, and we'll try and answer those at the end or separately if we haven't got time. But yeah, love to hear that. So let's move on a little bit to travel tips. So the absolute key question we get asked, and I think it's obvious why, but it's when to travel. So Melissa, families, when to go and why?
Yeah, I'll put my weatherman hat on here, but if I don't cover it all, there's actually quite a good page on our website that I put together at some point about this as well. So Sri Lanka is it's great in the winter, but they also have a sort of inter monsoon period in the summer holidays. So it's actually quite good in the summer holidays as well. So Sri Lanka kind of works year round in different ways. Summer is the best time to go to most of Indonesia and also to Malaysian Borneo. But specifically for Malaysian Borneo, availability can get quite tricky for the best wildlife experiences in summer, which sort of means you have to book it way in advance, but you can get sort of better deals if you go around Easter time. Plus, it's the rainforest, so I don't think it necessarily ruin, you can probably expect some rains. I don't think it's always going to ruin the holiday if there is a little bit of rain there. So yeah, so summer's best, but if you go around that a little bit, you sometimes get better availability and better prices. And for India, the season is mainly our winter. But for families, sometimes South India can work well around Easter, and Rajasthan can work during the late summer as well. Thailand's a really good option for Christmas. The weather's absolutely perfect. In Thailand at Christmas, it's hot, but it's not too hot. I've actually been to Thailand for Christmas a couple of years ago. My brother lives in Australia, so we met kind of in Thailand for Christmas. It was kind of cheaper than us going there or him coming here for us all to meet. And it was just brilliant, really relaxed. We had a lovely time. And Thailand's a really good one around Christmas time.
Any for half term?
Um, yeah, half term. Well, February's brilliant. I'm actually going away next week. February half term is really good. It's obviously it's a shorter holiday, so it can be tricky. I've sort of slightly cheekily taken the kids out of school for a day and a half, but February half term is actually really, really good time to go. It's pretty good weather in most destinations. Maybe not so much Indonesia and Borneo. We're actually going to Cambodia. Thailand's good. Sri Lanka's good. It's one of the best times actually. But for all those places, and actually you don't so much get the sort of flight prices increasing like they do in the other peak times.
Mm, 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 mm. And in terms of when you should book, what's the answer to that?
When you should book, well, that what I'm going to say here. Obviously, I'm going to say this, but as early as possible. Definitely for Christmas and summer. If I'm traveling in Christmas or summer, I always book pretty much a year in advance. As soon as the flights are released, that's really just the way to get the best prices. It's sort of a myth that prices come down. That only really happens when demand's low, and demand's always way outstrips supply for Christmas and summer. So you kind of just, the earlier you can book it, the better. I know it's not always possible, but every airline varies in that, but usually you can book from about 355 days in advance. And it's not impossible if you leave it longer, but flight prices start to creep up, and especially around Christmas time, the beach hotels can sell out. And yeah, like I said, February half term, I'm a big fan of traveling then. It's flights are a bit cheaper, it's the best weather. Obviously you have to take the kids out of school maybe for a day or two. And October is good for getting a good deal as well. And then Easter flights are cheaper than Christmas, but you still sort of tend to need to book quite far in advance for Easter, really.
And October, it's Thailand's good in October half term. Anywhere
Yeah,
else?
um, actually, probably the place is really good that we've not mentioned at all that we arrange holidays to is Oman is very good in October. That's like sort of perfect time to go there.
Hmm.
So that's good, yeah.
Yeah, good stuff.
And I guess Northern India as well is not a bad chat in October.
Yeah, that works well, and even up to the Himalayas and Uttarakhand and places like that would work well at that time,
Yeah.
if you've got those 2 weeks. So
Yeah, a lot
good.
of people do seem to have 2 weeks for we don't, but a lot of schools get 2 weeks in October now, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Holly, over to you. Bit of a segue here, but in terms of planning trips, we like to take a different approach, which I know sometimes parents think is crazy when we first suggest it. But can you tell us a bit more?
Yeah, so I mean, first and foremost, obviously, and I kind of mentioned it earlier, it's really about getting to know you and your family before getting into the nuts and bolts of the country itself. So, I think how can we possibly straight into, or jump straight into all of the finer details of the actual holiday itself without really understanding kind of what your motivations are for kind of escaping anyway and getting out of the country, being drawn to a particular country itself, who's already got the buy-in, who hasn't, and yeah, just generally kind of what everyone's interests are. So what I really want to know is not only what is everyone's interest, does anyone have particular hobbies or anything like that, but how do you guys want to feel coming back from a holiday? What do you want to have achieved from this holiday when you're already coming back and on that plane, and how do you want to have kind of feel having got out of that? But also, in order to do that, really, if we can, I'd love to get as many of family members on the kind of initial call as possible, get everyone involved. I want to speak to everyone, find out who's excited, perhaps who's even resisting for some reason. And it's quite fun because if we can get on for instance, on a video call, then we can get the maps up, we can get everybody excited and get everyone's buy-in. So yeah, I think that can really make a big difference to have everyone kind of involved as much as possible.
Yeah, and it's probably not on that first call. We can have a call where we talk, talk budgets and make sure it's possible and feasible and destinations. So we've got that kind of thing. But if we can then do a follow-up call with the whole family on, on Zoom, on Teams or whatever, it really can work in terms of getting buy-in. And I think it's worth giving some agency, particularly to teens, because if they feel they've been listened to and they've got something in there that they're looking for, I think there's so much more likely to buy into some of the other things that you do as a family. And I've definitely had experience of that. Yeah, myself. I remember when my boys were a bit younger, they loved a hotel buffet, so they insisted on that. Going back to that South India trip that I mentioned, they would insist that somewhere there was a big hotel breakfast buffet. And that wasn't really my idea of how to pick a hotel, but we went with that for at least one. And then, they felt that they'd been listened to, and they got this, so they got that in there. And I think that did make a difference. As they got older, to be honest, they still love a breakfast buffet, and probably still have to put it in. But things like making sure there was good pools, and there was one hotel which was basically they wanted a sort of luxury hotel in there, which I guess was maybe a bit more bling than I might have chosen. But again, been listening to them, and then they were more willing to go along with the other things, and actually found them running with some of the things that you'd be unexpected, particularly on the history side of things. They really were buying into it. So yeah, I think just giving the whole family some agency really is important. And getting everyone involved in planning can be a lot of fun as well. It's something to talk about that's not the day to day. It's outside of that, and you can get, you're anticipating it together, you're talking about it, and you're really getting a lot from that. So yeah, I think that is well worth thinking about. Melissa, back to you. Elephant in the room. Some people will be thinking it, so let's address it. But is it more expensive booking a trip through an operator like ourselves as compared with going direct?
Well, let's be honest, yes. Yes, it will be a bit more expensive than booking it yourself, but I think anyone who's ever traveled with us would agree that you do get value for money. I'm pretty sure that everyone would agree with that. And there's so much included in the holidays. First, obviously, you get the expertise of someone like Holly, who, like she says, can really take the time to understand your family, but she also really knows the countries and kind of help you cut through all that information out there and settle on an option that's kind of ideal for your family. You also get the experiences that we've designed exclusively for our customers. That's something I'm quite sort of heavily involved in, and we really do spend a lot of time making sure they're right and we don't cut any corners. And we're also very keen to make sure that we try and pay everyone fairly on the ground as well, and don't cut corners that way. You also get our fantastic team of guides. They can really make the trip. I read the feedback, and they really do have a huge impact on the tour, and people sort of love them, and they make the tour special. And there's also sort of support in country if you need it as well. If anything, God forbid, goes wrong, there's support in the country too. And one other thing that I'm not sure we really kind of mention that often is that even though the trips do cost a bit more, once you've paid for them, there really aren't that many more expenses. We include so much in them: the entrance fees, experiences, some meals. We include the transport, and we even kind of unusually we even try and include tips where we can as well. So when you're away, you don't really need an awful lot of money. I mean, I just from my own experience, we're talking sort of, hundreds really, rather than thousands like you'd spend in if you went to Florida or something like that. You really don't need that much money when you're there. And I think that's something we don't sort of say much about sometimes.
Yeah, with my grumpy dad hat on, that is quite important, I think, because people tend to, and there's actually a sort of thing that research has shown that people press the F it button when they're on holiday and just spend more than they would do otherwise. But generally, we've got that things are so much included that it's you really do control, so you know where you're at with it up front. I think that is and that is important. Melissa, are there little things that you can do to make sure you have this kind of real once in a lifetime, this fantastic kind of trip that really special, but ways of keeping that cost down?
Yeah, well, obviously I've mentioned flights quite a lot. Flights is the big one, but it's often easier said than done. Not everyone can book a year in advance, and sort of that's just something we have to work around and kind of look into for people. But another one, not for everyone, but I always try and incorporate into my holidays hotels that have got a room set up for four, or some kind of family room set up that doesn't mean I have to pay for another room for the kids. I know most parents don't want to do that every night. I actually don't really want to do it every night either, but I always tend to try and include the odd one of those in the mix in my trips to try and keep costs down. So that's one thing that I personally do that I think is a good way to get the cost down a little bit. A couple more quite specific tips for Indonesia. I've noticed over the years that flight prices always come down in the middle of the summer holidays. It's usually on about the 15th or 16th of August. So timing your holiday at the back end of the summer holidays, if you're interested in Indonesia, can sometimes be a little bit cheaper. And a good tip for Thailand at Christmas is to go to the beach at the beginning of the holiday, because the beach hotels tend to kind of almost triple their prices, specifically beach hotels, from about Christmas Eve to the 5th of January. But the rural hotels and the city hotels don't do that. So if you take the beach bit of the holiday at the beginning rather than at the end, you sometimes can save quite a bit of money. And I think also when I've been away at Christmas, I find I'm probably at the most stressed at that time as well, because before you go away, you're thinking about, Christmas presents and school concerts and all that sort of stuff, and getting work finished and getting, packing everything up. And I think it's actually quite nice to have the beach hotel at the beginning and just chill out for a bit before you go and do the sort of more kind of, the more kind of experiential side of things.
Yeah, and I think what we need to do as consultants is we need to know what is absolutely key for you, and what you can be flexible on. So if we know this, we know we can deliver that side of things, but we can look to save money on other things. But we really just need to drill down and make sure we work out what is important and what you can be more flexible out, and then we can make that work as far as possible. Um, Holly, any more tips from you?
Yeah, I would say that point about flexibility is a really important one, actually, because my tip would be to not necessarily get too set on perhaps staying at a certain level of hotel throughout the whole trip. There'll be areas where you're probably going to be out and about exploring more than you're in the hotel. Good examples, the cultural triangle in Sri Lanka. You know, you're out most of the day. There's so much to see and do around there. So, you know, do you necessarily need to spend a lot of money on the hotel that you come back to? You know, there's some perfectly, you know, reasonable sort of hotels that can save you a bit of money there, that work really nicely as a bed to come back to. And similarly, you know, homestays can be another great way of saving money and become part of the experience, and are really fun. And then that just gives you more to play with when it comes to, say, you know, the beach hotel, where you're going to be actually enjoying the facilities and what's around there a little bit more. So having a bit of a mix of levels throughout, I'd say, can be a really nice way of looking at it. And actually, just going back a little bit to what Melissa said about, you know, starting in the beach in Thailand, for instance, can be a really nice way to do it. I think thinking of that generally for your holidays, not necessarily starting on the beach, but just giving yourself a few days, you know, 1 or 2 even, just to relax at the start of the trip with not too much planned, let everyone kind of acclimatise in a nice setting, get over their jet lag, so you can then hit the ground running and really kind of be excited about all of the fun activities you have planned throughout the main part of the trip.
Yeah, and that's something that we always try and do as well, is to slow trips down, don't we? And just say, look, you can't cover everything. Don't try and cover everything. Find out what's important, but slow down so you've got time and space for yourselves, for the family, to enjoy it, and you know, to let things happen really. And I think that's incredibly important. And people often start saying, look, I want to go nice and slowly, but then say they want to see this and that, and it is about getting that planning right. At the same time, I think sometimes these kind of trips, the sort of luxury element is in the fact that the thinking is kind of taken care of in terms of the logistics. You know, you don't need to think about the logistics. You don't need to plan how you're going to get from A to B. That bit is solved, and that's the bit that you're constantly doing all day, every day during your life, and we can take away that bit during your trip and really, you know, leave that space to explore and to enjoy and to meet and connect. And I think that's really important. Just before we wrap up, airlines, just quick question on airlines. I know my family really find that quite important, and they really want to think about what airline we're going. I'm not so bothered. I like one of our customers travels a lot with their family. They're, I think, got a few children now in their 20s, and they've always gone business class and put their family in economy, which I thoroughly approve of. Not that I do that, but if you're not doing that, what airlines would you go for? I'm going to go early with Emirates. That's my family favorite airline. But Holly, what's yours?
I think I would go, if I had the choice, Singapore. Singapore
Singapore.
Airlines. Do the long haul in one go and then the short hop after.
Yeah, Singapore are absolute quality. And Melissa?
I'm going to have to agree with Holly. I was going to say Singapore Airlines as well. We flew to Indonesia with them last year and they were brilliant. Just like the service is great. TVs are all, you know, lots of entertainment. And one thing that really stood out to me is they like clean the plane all the time. So it just doesn't feel grubby like it sometimes does. So I would definitely, yeah, I thought they were great.
Yeah, we do a fair amount with Qatar Airlines. We should add. So nice.
Yeah, that they're good as well. But
It is a quick turnaround in you know, 2/3 of the way through the flight, so it works quite well. Direct airlines always, you know, they are always good, but yeah, you're generally sometimes compromising on the quality. So again, that's something that's worth talking to the consultant about. But that largely brings us to an end. I think we'll end on time because it is quite late. And if you're watching live, and we'd like to encourage you to give us a call. So do feel free to speak to us. If you'd just like to kick around a few ideas, you're not sure where to go, Melissa and I are very happy to talk. So, you know, just reply to one of our emails. No doubt we'll send a follow-up, and you can reply to that and say you'd like to speak to myself or Melissa, and we can throw around a few ideas and see where we're coming from. If you want to take that further, we can pass you on to the right consultant. If indeed you know you'd like to go to a destination, then please do contact us, and Holly, speak to Holly, and she'll either look after you herself or pass you on to one of the team who's best placed to help you, and we'd love to do that. In fact, if you'd like to book in something right now, there's a link in the chat there, so that would be great to speak to you. And for making the effort to come to this webinar, we will be offering you £500 to spend on something on your holiday if you book during February. So that will be a bonus. Now, we've also got to mention that we are participating in the Family Travel Show in Twickenham, which is on the 22nd and 23rd of March. Apparently, the tickets are quite pricey, but we do have some to give away. So do give us a shout, and we'll look out for our email on that, and we'll make sure that you get some of those if you're interested to go. So yeah, that's all. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Melissa and Holly, and we'd love to speak to you again soon. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.